Holy Spirit, I invite you into this. Have you ever been angry at God? Now, you don't have to answer that question. I'll tell it myself and I'll answer it. Yes, I have. I met a young woman on a missions trip once, and I got back stateside, and the Lord was like, well, what about her? So, of course, I thought, well, what about her? Ended up dating, and she and I had been together a short while before I was over the moon, man. I was done for. And I think I bought her more daisies than she knew what to do with, but I had learned how to get it right the first time. That's what I've been taught. I didn't know what to do with her questions, so we kept moving forward, but I didn't realize we were moving in different directions, and I had about $1,200 saved up when she broke up with me. I was gonna buy a ring. And it was a few months later before it clicked, you know? This was your idea, God, right? You were the one who said to, what about her? And it was kind of when the anger really came. That those thoughts of like, how could you let this happen? Or why would you lead me to pursue somebody that you knew was going to break up with me? And, I don't think he ever broke a sweat. There's a story in John 11 where one of Jesus' friends gets angry with him. And like my story, it seems like she has pretty good reasons to be. It says, today we're going to talk about John 11, verses 17 to 27. And that's the conversation Martha has with Jesus at the edge of the village of Bethany after Lazarus has died. Now, at the end of John 10, we see Jesus get driven out of Jerusalem by the Jewish population there under threat of stoning. At the beginning of chapter 11, he learns that Lazarus is sick, but he waits. He says this sickness is not unto death, and then he waits until he knows Lazarus is dead before he leaves for Bethany. And then we pick up in verse 17 when it says that Jesus came and he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 15 stadia away, that's a couple miles, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and to Mary to console them about their brother. So then Martha, when she heard that Jesus was coming, went to meet him, but Mary stayed in the house. Martha then said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been there, my brother would not have died. Even now, I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise from the dead. And Martha said to him, I know that he will rise in the resurrection on the last day. And Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life, and the one who believes in me will live even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? And Martha says to him, yes, Lord, I have come to believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, he who has come into the world. So Jesus has finally shown up, but too late to heal Lazarus. Of course Martha's angry, but she still has faith in him, even though he waited. And she still believes he's the Messiah, even though he waited. Now, reading the story of Martha, we get story mechanics that look something like this. Martha is the protagonist. Mary is a foil that we later see illustrating a different way to approach Jesus, but that's a whole separate sermon, so we'll just leave it at that. Jesus is at first the antagonist and then the hero, but at this point in the story, Jesus seems like the bad guy. I thought I was going to marry that girl. And then she broke up with me and moved 5 states away. 5. God seemed a lot like the bad guy in my story, too. But there's a twist. See, Jesus had said earlier in chapter 11 that Lazarus' sickness was not unto death. So why did he wait until Lazarus was dead? And Jesus at the end of chapter 10 was driven out of Jerusalem by the Jewish population there under threat of stoning. And why did Jesus wait until there were Jews from Jerusalem in Bethany before he went to Bethany? If we keep reading, we find out that some of the Jews who were in Bethany went to the Pharisees to report Jesus, and it was this report that convinced the Pharisees that Jesus had to die. So why didn't Jesus wait? because this is his story. Lazarus, Martha, Mary, they're all characters in Jesus' story, not as much the other way around. If Jesus heals Lazarus of his sickness, there are no mourners from Jerusalem to go and tell the Pharisees. If Jesus only heals Lazarus of sickness, is that enough to drive the Pharisees over the edge? If Jesus doesn't wait, something else will have to precipitate the necessary events that will lead to his own death and resurrection. So ultimately, Lazarus is a prophetic symbol of what is about to happen in the life of Jesus and the catalyst for those events occurring. So why does Jesus wait? Because this is the story of Jesus, the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God, proving he is also the resurrection and the life. I think Martha responds like she does because she doesn't know whose story she's in. Martha's story is, hey Jesus, Lazarus has been dead 4 days, and I think you showing up now might be more hurtful than if you hadn't shown up at all. But Jesus' story is this: Lazarus will die, and in 4 days I will raise him from the dead. And this will lead some of your friends here to return to Jerusalem and tell the Pharisees what I've done, so that when I re-enter Jerusalem in a short time, some of them will be worshiping me and some of them will be determined to kill me, and they will succeed. But I will be the perfect Passover lamb for the salvation of all, because it is necessary. And then I will rise again, and because of what you have seen here in Bethany, you will have an experience to attach your faith to. And I'm going to rise in 3 days. So you'll still have another day's worth of faith left. I, who raised Lazarus from the dead, am the resurrection and the life. That is Jesus' story. And this is what I want us to take away from today, is Jesus is with us in our story. Even if he shows up in his timing and not ours, he's with us in our story. But are we with him in his? Can we see past our pain enough to catch a glimpse of what he's doing in the midst of it? See, that never means that we pretend or that we shut ourselves off from the reality of what's going on or what we're going through. It means seeing Jesus in the midst of our pain instead of seeing him through the lens of our pain. My healing after that breakup could really take a step forward when I could see past the pain to see that God's story, the story he was writing, was of healing for all of my painful interactions and experiences of women. And that the wound of that breakup actually opened up areas of my heart that have been closed off to God. Do we see Jesus as a character in the story of our lives, or do we see ourselves as characters in the story of God? And have we accepted that as secondary characters in this cosmic narrative, things might not go the way we want them to? Now, these are prescription, and these are not. And that's a bit what it's about, like what it's like looking at life through the lens of our pain and through the lens of our story and not God's. So I want everybody to do a prophetic act with me today. And I want you to repeat with me. If you agree, if your heart's not in it, then don't incriminate yourself. But I hope you all go with me here. Pretend you got shades on like I do, and we're just going to say, Jesus, we surrender our perspective. We surrender our story. We surrender our lenses. And thank you, Father, for your perspective. Let's see again. For your perspective and your story in our lives. If this struck a chord today, there's information in our bulletins for how to contact our pastors, and we would love to make an appointment with you to meet with you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.